I was lost. My earliest years are marked by abandonment on the streets of India, and then adoption and grief. As an orphan in India, though I was so young and little, I was not spared from the dark environment of poverty. Specific memories of graphic violence, rape, starvation, and separation or abandonment by those who were meant to care for me have haunted me all my life. It left me believing that I couldn't escape these fears these memories presented, and that I would be better off dead. Like Job, I cursed the day I was born and thought everyone else must have too. God blessed me, though, with an adoptive family that believed in him, and also family members who did not choose to live for him. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I went to church camp, like I did every summer, but this time my eyes were open to my sin, and not just the brutality of Christ's graphic death and how he was supposed to move me to want him and love him. I saw and felt this need of being saved because I really was personally sinful. For a while after camp, I decided to entrust God with my sins in exchange for Christ's righteousness and eternity with him. Those who knew me well at this point in my life could see the change in me. I was disciplined in prayer, Bible study, and Bible reading. I also became very tender-hearted and concerned for the eternal future of anyone who did not know Christ as their own Savior. One of the biggest differences between those around me and God was that with others, I could hide quite a bit. I lived under the misunderstanding that salvation is for every day of my life once I die. Until then, I would still have all my sin, all my shame, and hopelessness of the past, present, and future. So that's how I lived. Every mistake, sin, loneliness, grief, or loss led to utter despair and shame. So much so that I was convinced I had only two options. One was to live and try to meet all of the expectations, realistic and unrealistic, to meet my version of perfectionism, and punish myself for any and all failures. The other option I felt was appropriate was death. This was largely influenced by trauma before my adoption, and then confirmed throughout my life by others and the perpetual shame that I was in. My adoptive parents have always been influential in my life. Unfortunately, I received almost all of their love through the filter of my shame, which canceled out all the love they offered. This built up until I no longer wanted them in my life, and my heart hardened, much like the younger brother in the parable of the prodigal son. Except I didn't even want money or an inheritance from them. I just wanted to die, or have them die, so I could live without their benchmarks of success and other stipulations I felt each time I failed. All the while, I was living like a good church girl to those around me, but I was falling prey to lie after lie about God and others and myself. My mind and heart were wired for survival and not living. So my lack of faith in God was revealed with each trigger of loss or danger or mistakes. Instead of calling and relying on God in those times, I froze in panic or self-hatred, which led to hiding from God and others just how terrified I was of death and life, and especially trusting people. When I was only 9 years old, I found pornography online and had been sexually abused by a girl who wasn't much bigger than me for most of my elementary through high school years, and then more blatantly by a man where I worked in high school. I intermittently self-harmed to escape reality and punish myself for using pornography or masturbation as a way to cope with fear, shame, and grief of those I had lost from infancy to the present. One of the men who really impacted me was a married friend I had in college. I naively believed he could meet my emotional desires for my biological brother that I had lost in India. In the end, he confessed all the ways he had manipulated those desires to get all he could take from me. This last betrayal, partnered with my shame and self-hatred for letting my guard down, destroyed me. I tried to find God in it and began to hope in his purpose for creating unity between men and women, but I couldn't live with my view of God and myself. I had already sought to know him theologically in Bible college, but the fascination wore off and I ran away from reality in all my relationships. I was ready to die. I would disappear first and then die of starvation, as I was expected to as an orphan in India. I thought after being admitted to the psychiatric ward 2 years ago would be enough to keep me from wanting to commit suicide or self-harm again. But I had to go further away from God before I could see my need for Him as my loving Father. For about 8 months, I was in and out of a catatonic trance that controlled me. It was the closest experience to being possessed by a demon that I can even come close to understanding, and it was as close to hell that I can ever stand to be. God was with me even then. In the last month of my trance-like state, I called out to God rather pitifully, but He answered me with help. I didn't believe Him until a few weeks before coming to His mansion, and in hindsight, He was working a miracle in me to pull me out of that trance every time I called His mansion and communicated that I wanted to come. I came to trust those around me, but it took a long time. I was afraid of everyone, and I was in denial to my fear and my pride and my shame and just all the memories that came up. And even in denial of my God-given desire for connection with Him and with others. I found that I really needed relationships and community. God was not who I said He was, but He was who He says He is. He also did not reject me when I resisted Him. I fought Him. But He met me in my grief and fear and responded with firm love. His love is that of a father and brother, friend, and lover of my soul. He wants all of me and wants me to want all of Him. I had to risk re-experiencing betrayal and abuse to find His real character. God is my ultimate Father, and His Son is a gentle and loving shepherd, and His Spirit is comforting and always with me. In Psalm 24, it says, "Lift up your eyes, O ancient gates, and see the glory of God." And I want my guard to always be down like this so that my heart and my very being is a temple that He flows in and out of so that I can always experience Him and know Him and be known by Him.